The Galactic fleet celebrated victory, then Earth's dreadnoughts appeared. The Dominion Grand Admiral Valix stood at the bridge of the Victory Eternal, gazing out at the battlefield. Debris floated listlessly in the void, shattered warships, lifeless escape pods, and the smoldering wreckage of a once defiant planet below. It had taken decades, but the Dominion had finally crushed the last resistance of the Terran coalition. Or so they thought. Grand Admiral, one of his officers, a pale-skinned Zitari with flickering bioluminescent veins, stepped forward. Scanners confirm no remaining Terran ships in the system. Their fleet is annihilated. Valix exhaled, a satisfied smirk curling his elongated lips. The war had been grueling, humanity had resisted with a stubbornness the Dominion had never encountered before. When the Zitari conquered other species they folded within years. But humans? They fought like cornered beasts, throwing wave after wave of tactics, counterattacks, and suicidal last stands that cost the Dominion more than it ever expected. But now Earth was defenseless. The Dominion fleet, a vast armada of 2,000 warships, hovered over the Terran homeworld, its burning continents casting an eerie glow in the void. The sight of total Dominion supremacy. Valix turned to his communications officer. Broadcast to all forces. This war is over. Humanity is finished. A roar of cheers erupted across the fleet. Officers exchanged victorious gestures. Soldiers who had fought tooth and claw against the humans allowed themselves a rare moment of relief. Some even laughed. After all, who could possibly challenge the might of the Dominion now? That's when the alarm screamed. Valix's smirk vanished. Report, he barked. Sir, something just exited slip space. Multiple contacts. He whirled toward the main viewport. Space ripped apart, glowing fissures in reality opening across the void. From them, massive, ominous silhouettes emerged, each vessel dwarfing even the Dominion's largest battleships. The crew on the bridge fell silent. Then the scanners lit up, flashing a name that no one had ever seen before. TDS Oblivion. TDS Doomsday. TDS Exterminatus. Valix's blood ran cold. These weren't standard Terran warships. These were something far worse. Impossible, one officer whispered. The humans, they still have a fleet? Not just a fleet. A dreadnought armada. And they had come for vengeance. Silence gripped the Dominion bridge as the Terran dreadnoughts loomed in the void like vengeful gods. Their hulls, forged from abyss-black alloys, devoured light, casting them as obsidian specters against the burning wreckage of humanity's homeworld. Grand Admiral Valix had faced thousands of battles, crushed entire star systems beneath his fleet. But this was something else entirely. The Dominion's warships were massive, capital-class destroyers, carriers, and annihilation cruisers that had subjugated countless species. But the TDS Oblivion, the largest of the Terran vessels, dwarfed them all. It wasn't just bigger, it was built for something entirely different. Something terrifying. How? Valix's voice cracked before he forced control back into his tone. How many ships? The bridge crew scrambled. Scanners detect 12 confirmed dreadnoughts, sir, the sensor officer stammered. But the readings. Spit it out. Sir, these ships, they're putting out energy signatures that surpass planetary defense stations. Their reactors, they rival stars. That wasn't possible. The Dominion's most powerful warships operated on antimatter cores, powerful enough to turn moons into slag. But this? What kind of technology had humanity developed in the dark? Valix's eyes snapped to the viewport. Then the dreadnoughts moved. The TDS Oblivion accelerated forward at an impossible speed for something its size, positioning itself directly between the Dominion fleet and Earth's burning remains. The others followed, taking a formation that suggested one thing and one thing only: a counterattack. All ships, battle formation. Valix roared. Target the lead vessel. He never finished, because that's when the first shot was fired. The first strike. It wasn't a kinetic round. It wasn't a standard plasma barrage. It was something else entirely. The TDS Doomsday fired first. A single, concentrated beam of dark red energy erupted from its central cannon. It didn't explode. It didn't crackle like Dominion ion weapons. It erased. The Dominion annihilation cruiser Dawn's Vengeance was caught in the beam's path. For a split second, it stood defiant, its shields flaring against the onslaught. Then it vanished. No explosion. No wreckage. Nothing. A hole in space where a warship had been. The bridge crew stopped breathing. That was a fully shielded capital ship, one of the officers whispered. One shot, Owen. Panic spread through the Dominion fleet. They had expected resistance, not this. Fire. All ships, fire everything. Valix bellowed. The Dominion warships unleashed hell. Thousands of plasma bolts, antimatter warheads, and railgun slugs erupted from the fleet, streaking toward the 12 Terran dreadnoughts. A storm of destruction. And yet, not a single dreadnought took damage. Their shields didn't just block Dominion fire. They consumed it. Valix watched in growing horror as kinetic rounds disintegrated mid-flight, plasma detonations imploded on impact, and even antimatter warheads fizzled into harmless energy. That was impossible. The Dominion had never encountered defenses like this. Then the Terran fleet fired back. The slaughter. The TDS Exterminatus released a salvo of planet cracker torpedoes, weapons so massive that each one carried enough destructive yield to sterilize a world. The torpedoes didn't just impact their targets, they tore them apart at a molecular level. Dominion warships exploded in fireballs of blackened energy, their hulls disintegrating into clouds of dust. A single torpedo from the TDS extinction struck a Dominion carrier, bypassing its defenses entirely. It collapsed inward, like a dying star. One after another, Dominion ships vanished from existence. Not destroyed. Not wrecked. Erased. The fleet was breaking. Panic turned into outright terror. And then a transmission came through. The message from Earth. A deep, distorted voice echoed across all Dominion channels. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a surrender. It was a declaration. You should have finished the job. Every Dominion officer froze. The voice continued, calm and controlled, but laced with fury. You burned our world. You killed billions. You thought we would beg. That we would fade. That humanity would die. Silence. And then the final words. You were wrong. The TDS Oblivion surged forward. The fall of the Dominion flagship. Valix knew they had lost. He had known the moment that first warship vanished. But he refused to die cowering. All remaining ships retreat, he ordered. Dozens of vessels turned, engaging slipspace drives to escape. But before Valix could give the order for his own ship to flee, the TDS Oblivion locked onto the Victory Eternal. A massive, claw-like mechanism unfolded from the underside of the dreadnought. Sir, an officer screamed. They've locked onto. The entire Dominion flagship shuddered violently. They weren't being hit. They were being dragged. Gravity fields ripped the Dominion warship from its position, pulling it directly toward the abyssal hull of the Terran dreadnought. Like a predator seizing its prey. And then, for the first time in Dominion history, a Grand Admiral begged. Valix's voice cracked. Wait. We can negotiate. The Dominion will. The last thing he saw was the hangar doors of the TDS Oblivion opening wide. A void of absolute darkness swallowing his ship whole. Then, nothing. The Dominion fleet is in complete disarray. The flagship is captured. High-stakes escalation. The Terran fleet isn't just winning, they're annihilating the Dominion. Unanswered questions. Where did these ships come from? What will happen to Valix? A Grand Admiral in chains. Valix awoke to darkness. The air was cold, sterile. A dreadful silence pressed against his ears, broken only by his own ragged breathing. He tried to move, his limbs wouldn't obey. Restraints. He was strapped down to a cold, metallic slab. Then the lights flickered on and he saw them. Humans. 3 of them stood before him, clad in blackened combat armor, the sigil of a shattered Earth emblazoned across their chests. Their faces were obscured behind cold, reflective visors. Valix had fought in over 100 campaigns. He had conquered entire worlds. He had stood before dying monarchs and listened to their pathetic pleas. Now he was the one at their mercy. A 4th figure stepped forward. Not armored. Not masked. A woman. She was older, scars lining her face, her once dark hair streaked with gray. Her eyes, they were what terrified him most. A predator's gaze. She leaned down, staring into him like he was something to be dissected. Grand Admiral Valix, she murmured. Her voice was smooth, calm. Leader of the Dominion's first fleet. Architect of 100 planetary bombardments. She tilted her head. Tell me, Valix, what does it feel like to be on the other side? He forced his mouth to move. You don't understand. A fist smashed into his face. His vision blurred, pain blooming through his skull. You don't get to speak yet, the woman said, shaking out her hand. Not until you understand exactly what you've done. She nodded at one of the armored figures. A screen flickered to life. What humanity endured. Valix had seen planetary destruction before. He had ordered it. But the footage showed Earth's last moments, not from the Dominion's vantage point, but from within the cities. Screams. Families clutching each other as the sky turned to fire. People burning alive in the streets as the orbital bombardment rained hell down upon them. Children crying out for parents who would never answer. Then, the aftermath. Cities reduced to glowing craters. Skies choked with ashes of the dead. A single survivor stumbled through the wreckage, skin blackened from radiation, coughing blackened blood. He collapsed face first into the ruins of his home, his fingers barely touching the charred remains of a family photo. Valix turned away. "Look at it," the woman ordered. He clenched his jaw. "I was following orders." A cold laugh. "So were the officers on those Dominion ships you just watched get erased." She stepped closer, voice lowering to a whisper. "You burned our world. You thought you ended us." She tapped the screen. "We are still here." She straightened, expression unreadable. "And we are never going to stop." The truth of the Dreadnoughts. Valix finally forced himself to speak through the pain. "Your ships." He swallowed. "They shouldn't exist. Humanity was wiped out, your fleets, your colonies. What are these vessels? How did you build them?" The woman smiled. But it wasn't warm. It was the smile of a predator. "You think Earth was our only home?" she murmured. "That we didn't plan for this." She turned to the screen again. It changed. Now, schematics of the TDS Oblivion filled the display. Valix's stomach twisted. "This is what you failed to understand," she continued. "For years you saw us as lesser. Primitive. Weak. But humans? We don't go down easily. We don't just adapt. We evolve. And while your Dominion was celebrating our extinction, we were becoming something else." Valix stared at the weapon systems detailed on the screen, technology that shouldn't exist. Shield matrices that warped reality itself. Plasma weapons that ignored armor and shields entirely. And the reactors. He inhaled sharply. "These aren't antimatter. This is something else." The woman nodded. "Dark matter fusion," she said simply. "The kind of power your Dominion never even imagined." Valix's breath hitched. This wasn't just a resistance force. This was something far worse. The final warning. The woman leaned in close, her voice lowering to a whisper. "This war isn't over, Valix," she murmured. "You were foolish enough to think you had already won." She straightened, eyes locked onto him. "But now." She gestured to the display of the Dreadnought fleet, burning bright with the fury of a vengeful humanity. "Now you're going to carry a message back to your Dominion." Valix swallowed hard. You're letting me live." The woman's expression darkened. "No." She turned, walking toward the exit. "But one of your crew will." Valix didn't even have time to scream before the guards grabbed him. Retribution. The next Dominion vessel that dared to approach the battlefield found something floating in the wreckage. A survivor. A single officer from the Victory Eternal, trembling and half-mad with terror. The Dominion retrieved him. He was delirious, whispering only 3 words over and over again. "They're still here." Then the transmission came. One final message, broadcasted across every Dominion world. A single warning. Humanity endures. And the war that the Dominion thought was over had only just begun. The Dominion now knows the truth. Humanity survived. The Dreadnoughts are just the beginning. The war is no longer about survival. It's about vengeance. One final battle looms. The Empire's delusion. High Sovereign Zyron stood before the Dominion Council, his mandibles clicking in agitation. The chamber, once a place of absolute rule, hummed with uncertainty. The news had spread like wildfire. Humanity was alive. Their Dreadnoughts existed. And the Dominion's victory was a lie. The holographic projection before him displayed the wreckage of the First Fleet, a slaughterhouse of twisted metal, the Dominion's finest ships reduced to cosmic dust. And yet, what disturbed him most was the lone survivor's final words, echoing through the chamber. "They're still here." The council was in chaos. Some argued that it was impossible. That the Terrans were nothing but ghosts, remnants of a fallen species. Others understood the horrifying truth. Humanity had never been defeated. They had merely gone into the shadows, evolving into something else. "Enough." Zyron snarled, his voice silencing the council. His multiple eyes flickered across the chamber. "We are the Dominion. We control the stars. No backwater species can stand against us." The room hushed, but it was not obedience. It was fear. Because they all knew. This was no longer a war of conquest. It was a war of vengeance. And they were on the wrong side of it. The Dreadnoughts' arrival. The Dominion's core systems had been untouched for millennia. No enemy had ever reached them. The defenses around Primes, the capital world, were impenetrable. 1,000 planetary turrets, orbital fortresses, and entire armadas of warships surrounded the planet in an unbreakable shield of firepower. Nothing could breach it. Nothing ever had. Until now. The Oblivion arrived in absolute silence. One moment the void was empty. The next, a titanic shadow cast itself across the Dominion's core fleet. The Dominion ships turned. They should have seen it coming. But they didn't. Because the Oblivion had never jumped through hyperspace. It had ripped through reality itself. A breach in the fabric of space-time, a method of travel that the Dominion had never even conceived. By the time their sensors registered its presence, it was too late. The sky burns. Open fire. The Dominion's entire defense network unleashed hell upon the intruder. Planetary turrets, orbital bombardment cannons, dreadnought-class railguns, a hurricane of firepower erupted, aimed at the lone human warship. A barrage powerful enough to shatter moons. And the Oblivion did not move. It absorbed it, like a black hole swallowing light. The Dominion officers stared in horror as their most powerful weapons vanished upon impact. The shields of the Oblivion did not flicker. They did not weaken. They consumed. And then the Oblivion finally answered. One shot. One single shot. A spherical distortion of energy formed at the Dreadnought's core, a ripple of pure annihilation. The Dominion officers barely had time to scream orders before the energy wave expanded outward. And in one instant, the entire orbital fleet was gone. The capital city was gone. The Dominion's throne world was glass. A silence fell over the Dominion's remaining systems. And then, across every transmission, across every surviving Dominion planet, one final message was broadcasted. A single chilling phrase. We are still here. And then humanity spoke. The end of the Dominion. The voice echoed across the stars. It was calm. Controlled. Cold. You called us lesser. You burned our world. You slaughtered billions believing us weak. Now you understand. The High Sovereign of the Dominion, the ruler of 1,000 worlds, stood frozen in his war chamber, his claws gripping the edge of his throne. His eyes widened in terror as he saw the message broadcasting to every Dominion planet. It was not a declaration. It was an ultimatum. The Dominion ends today. The Oblivion and its fleet of Terran dreadnoughts spread out, emerging from the void across every Dominion world. The surviving Dominion forces scrambled to mount a defense. It was pointless. The war was already over. The last High Sovereign of the Dominion fell to his knees, his strength failing him. This was not an invasion. It was an execution. The Oblivion Protocol. The Dominion never recovered. Their empire, once spanning galaxies, was reduced to dust. Their fleets, once unstoppable, were hunted to extinction. And humanity? Humanity did not conquer. They did not enslave. They erased. Every Dominion-controlled system was purged, its rulers dragged from their thrones, their war machines turned to ash. Humanity had not just survived. They had evolved into something beyond understanding. And now, as the last remnants of the Dominion vanished, only one truth remained. Earth was avenged. The galaxy would never forget. Because when the stars whispered of monsters, they no longer spoke of the Dominion. They spoke of humanity. And the name that would haunt the void forever. The Oblivion. Rocket humanity just changed the galactic order forever. Collision like, comment and subscribe if you loved this HFY epic. Loudspeaker, what would you do if Earth's dreadnoughts appeared? Drop your thoughts below. Bell, turn on notifications so you never miss the next legendary HFY story. Fire, more human domination incoming. Stay tuned.